Hello, this is Kinninigan from RagingReptilian.com. This video is going to be called The Fall of Atlantis and the Rise of Babylon. I'm going to give you my interpretation of human history as I believe it happened throughout all the years of research I've been doing. Now, all these links for everything I'll be citing will be in the description of the video. I'm also going to do this video in a few parts. And if you notice, probably on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you'll see like part 1 overlaid, and I'll do that for each part of the video. So if you can't watch the whole thing in one sitting, and you want to watch it part by part, the parts are basically I'm going to give you a quick history of Atlantis as per Thoth the Atlantean, right from the Emerald Tablets. The second part, I'm going to give you a little more proof of Atlantis and the other civilization that was around in that time, known as Lemuria. Also, I'm going to give a short chapter on the rise of Babylon and the Anunnaki after the Alpha Draconian takeover, and that will be based off some of their own Sumerian tablets. And the last part will be who is actually still in power today. It's Follow the Eagle. Yes, Rome of all people. And I'm going to tell you where Rome located to and how Rome is still ruling the world. But Rome is just nothing more than a modern it is Babylon. It is the Alpha Draconian reptilians. And I'm also going to tell you the difference between the two. There is a native species of reptilians on Earth known as the Terrans, who were around probably at the time of Atlantis, who lived on the mythical island of Lemuria probably. Now the Alpha Draconians are more bird-like, hence I tell you to follow the eagle symbol with Rome. So according to Thoth, I'm going to give you a little bit of the history of Atlantis here. Now, if you are able to help me out with any donations through Patreon or through merchandise, all the links will be in the description. Yes, I have been demonetized off YouTube. However, I do enjoy giving these lectures. Now, I have a lot of content on my channel, so if there's anything that I'm covering that you want me, or would you like to hear me go like in more depth in, I have a lot of playlists on my channel. I'll put these in the descriptions. The playlist that you really want to look for, I have Sumerian Anunnaki mythos for a lot of the lectures I've already given on ancient Babylon and the Alpha Draconian reptilians. I have 23 videos just in that playlist alone. I've got another playlist with 68 videos on it just on lectures I've given about the occult, a whole range of different subjects, everything from secret societies, Sumeria, ancient mysteries, and like I said, this is going to be an accumulation of all the research I've been doing over the years, and I'm trying to put this into one video to kind of sum up the entire history of the world. Here's another playlist of ancient mythology that covers, and with the lectures I've given on ancient mythology, including, for example, Rama's Bridge, a 1.5 million year old man-made construction that also deals with the demon god who was probably a reptilian himself, Ravana, I'm thinking that the civilization of Atlantis that we're talking about with Thoth could quite possibly be a lot older than anyone ever anticipated. This also ties in with the pyramid complex at Giza, which Thoth says he built, and how old that really is, there's a big mystery surrounding that, but we know that was not part of dynastic Egypt. That was part of a land called Kemet that was actually set up by Thoth the Atlantean. And of course, the most recent playlist I've done is the complete reading of the Emerald Tablets, which I'm basing a lot of this research off of, and analysis of each one of these tablets in depth. So like I said, if there's any subject that you want to hear me go more in depth into for one of my other lectures, I'll put these links in the description. I have a lot of playlists with a lot of content in them. Now, when a lot of people think of Atlantis, they think of, like I said, this Greco-Roman kind of thing, but that is not what we are told. Thoth claims to be an Atlantean that survived after the sinking of the mother country, In the next chapter, I will go over the creation of the universe and how the Alpha Draconians did retaliate against them. The Alpha Draconians infiltrated Atlantis, and the Atlantis that we're talking about, it had 10 islands, and the main island was Undal, with the city of Kior. So it was not this one island with concentric circles around it, like a lot of people think of. When they think of Atlantis, like I said, you get that kind of Greek idea of Atlantis, but it was hijacked. I believe Plato hijacked that from obviously a much older civilization. The other thing in this tablet, as Thoth goes through the history of Atlantis, is he is the one who takes credit for building the Great Pyramid of Giza in the land he called Kemet, which was erroneously attributed to Cheops. It was not part of dynastic Egypt. There are no hieroglyphs in the Great Pyramid, and he also claims to have built the Lion Man, otherwise known as the Sphinx. And I believe that he built this pyramid to open a stargate where he fled the earth after the sinking of the mother country. So, Doreel, when he translated these tablets, he made an assumption that they might be 36,000 years old, but it doesn't tie into, I'll show you with the rise of Babylon, for example, we have the Sumerian Kings list, which goes back 240,000 years alone. So obviously the pyramids and the civilization of Atlantis we're talking about is much older. One of the downfalls of Atlantis was when blood magic was brought into Atlantis. And the Atlanteans were a civilization that were practicing of such things mentioned in these tablets, astral projection. They used a language that was in Maldek. I believe I have this pulled up here. This was the planet of Maldek. It was 5 times the size of Earth, and when the destruction of Maldek would happen, we would get the asteroid belt, and that was the creation of the asteroid belt. It also sunk Atlantis into the Atlantic Ocean, and Lemuria is actually where it impacted, and we have proof of that in the Pacific Ocean in the Mariana Trench, which shows a huge scar from something. They can't, well, they say they can't, but we've never even seen any real video of the Mariana Trench. They claim they can't go down deep enough, but there's some other interesting things about that they're covering up. Now, this was the symbol of Maldek for the language they used, quote-unquote, known as Silver Tongue. I believe the Atlanteans in any advanced civilization would have been using telepathy as a way of communication, hence why we get this one eye, and this symbol would be hijacked also by the elite as the mocking tongue of Lucifer when they give us the Tower of Babel incident, so we can no longer communicate with each other. But this was a universal language utilized by the people of Maldek and probably the Atlanteans, where they could all communicate with each other. Something that is still going on this day and creates a lot of barriers for humans. One of the ways I'm going to show you how they've been able to stay in power so long, otherwise known as the Illuminati, as I've referred to them, is this divide and conquer tactics that they've been using. They've tried to model human civilization through a few different ways, but they failed, and eventually they would go and use Rome for this, and we'll talk about Rome later on in the video. They obviously set up Babylon, and that failed, the Anunnaki. We also had Egypt, which another civilization that ironically falls. And the downfall of these civilizations, take like Egypt, and Egypt, yeah, it was conquered by Alexander the Great, even though they pretty much surrendered to him, and then he would set up the city of Alexandria. Alexander the Great also conquered Babylon. So I believe there were some metaphors in here where they would use like the Greco-Roman structure to set up modern society. And Rome would expand throughout the known ancient world, but there was a method to their madness, so we'll talk about Rome later. The Atlanteans did not practice black magic, and it wasn't until blood magic came into the Atlantean civilization that in Tablet 8 we get a story of Thoth telling us about how the reptilians infiltrated Atlantis. By some of the Atlanteans who, out of selfishness, wanting power of all things, which is why people practice the occult, they started using what was known as blood magic. These reptilians had the ability to assume human form. I'm just going to use human, but I'm referring to the Atlanteans. I do not believe the Atlanteans are the same humans we are today. Because Maldek was bigger, it falls in line with the idea of back in the ancient times of dinosaurs, who were probably around at that time. Everything was bigger. Plants were bigger, animals were bigger, and the hominoids were probably bigger. We also have a lot of proof of this with, I've done a few videos on it. I highly suggest you check out Mud Fossil University. Roger over there, tell him Kinninigan sent it. He knows who I am. And this idea of mud fossils, and that would have happened during the destruction of Maldek. And that's when I believe a lot of these mud fossils were formed. And it's pretty interesting because I'm going to show you in the other chapter, we have a Sumerian tablet, the dragon myth of creation, which actually states that the Anunnaki could not come, the Agigi actually, the Agigi are the ones who create the Anunnaki, but they had to wait quite a few years before they can actually come down to the earth and settle, eventually when Marduk would set up Babylon. So in Atlantis, we have this, I believe the Atlanteans themselves, and this would make sense, were refugees of some kind of intergalactic war that probably happened millions of years ago. And they came here as refugees. They probably set the islands up in the Atlantic because they couldn't live on the land with the dinosaurs or the native Terran reptilians. Now the native Terran reptilians, I've done a few videos on them. This is a statue that exists in South America, in Peru. It's called Morop, and that translates out to Iguana Man. These native Terrans, this is what I believe they look like. These are more of your iconic, when you think of reptilians, the scaly ones. They fled to the underground after the fall of Lemuria, the survivors. I've done a video on the Lacerda files where she talks about this. And she also talks about the invading Draconians, although she didn't refer to them as that. And that they coexisted on this planet with other species known as the Atlanteans. And I believe that some of the Atlanteans, after the fall of the mother country, some of them fled into the hollow earth, and some of them went to the land of Kem and escaped through various stargates. And we have other pyramids around the planet, which they are modeled after the pyramids of Giza, which were quite possibly built by the Atlanteans themselves. These older structures that we have on the planet, we have ancient structures such as like the Baalbek complex and a lot of the things built by ancient Rome, Babylon, and those are ancient, but we're talking about something that's even older than that. It's often referred to as Cyclopean architecture. Ironically, the Cyclops is the symbol of Maldek, but they refer to it as Cyclopean. A lot of these ancient structures, too, are also built out of this very mysterious black granite, too. And they try to cover up a lot of the timelines on this, on how old these structures really are. But like I said, I think we're going back on a history here that might go back quite possibly 1,000,000 years, especially when we have the Hindu mythologies of Brahma's Bridge that go back 1.5 million years. So when blood magic started being performed in Atlantis, these reptilian shapeshifters, like I said, they had the ability to go into human form, we'll say Atlantean form. And the way that the Atlanteans were able to discover these shape-shifting reptilians was by using my name, Kinninigan, and they would have their leaders come up in front of the public once a year and say Kinninigan to prove that they were human, and if they turned into a serpent, they were beheaded. Apparently, well, why did the Alpha Draconians infiltrate Atlantis in the first place? And I would say that the answer to that is still going on. I mean, look at social media. You say anything against the establishment, and you're becoming a beacon of light, they'll try to censor you, demonetize you, like I've been on YouTube. I think that these Atlantean refugees were seen as a threat by the Alpha Draconians. So they came here with their ability to shapeshift, tempted people with blood magic, which is actually stated right in this tablet. And they started infiltrating a lot of the leaders in Atlantis. And it's stated right here, forth they came into the cycle of formless were they of another vibration, existing unseen by the children of earthmen. Only through blood could they have formed being. Only through man could they live in the world. And what he's speaking of is, yes, the shape-shifting reptilians. In ages past they were conquered by masters, driven below to the place whence they came, but some who there remain, hidden in spaces and plains unknown to man. Lived they in Atlantis as shadows, but at times they appeared among men, aye, when the blood was offered. That is blood magic. The reptilians would also, with the rise of Babylon, bring black magic. And I'm going to show you a Sumerian grimoire when we talk about Babylon in that chapter. So, anytime that I mention the word pagan, I'm also referring to the Roman definition of pagan. That is anyone who worships a pantheon of gods or goddesses, the reptilians, the Alpha Draconians, who see themselves as living gods. And paganism, according to the Roman definition, is anyone who engages in human or animal sacrifices to the gods or goddesses, hence blood magic, the taking of another life to summon one of these vile creatures. What the Atlanteans were practicing before this, I wouldn't essentially call magic. I guess the best word for this would be mystic arts. But they were using such things as mentioned in the tablets as astral projection, being able to contact other civilizations through projecting themselves astrally throughout the universe. And this is why I believe the Alpha Draconians would originally attacked. They saw them as a threat to their own civilization. Now, the reptilians didn't come here in an invading force, as per the Sumerian tablets. It was the Dragon Queen, also known as Mamu Tiamat, who would board the Ajiji, who would then come down and create the Anunnaki, and the Anunnaki would then in turn create us. Is it possible that some of our DNA that they cloned us with was taken from the Atlanteans? It's quite possible. But obviously, they saw Atlantis, or what Atlantis stood for, and Maldek as a threat, and that's why I believe they would initially infiltrate. Now, reptilians feed off what is called loss energy. They are negative energy parasites, and they feed off all the negativity created by them, which still goes on today. We also have what's referred to as our reptilian part of the brain, and anytime that people are tapping into their reptilian part of the brain, that's usually a lot of the things that fuel the archonic energy that they feed off of. The Alpha Draconians would also invent a slave race known as the Archons, your typical 3 to foot tall looking alien greys. They're more like biological drones, and they are the ones that are contacted in all things black magic. So these, obviously, it's okay, this is the chapter here. In the form of man they amongst us, but only to sight were they as men, serpent-headed when the glamour was lifted. But appearing to men as men among men, crept they into the councils, which is why the Atlanteans would challenge them. They would figure out a word that used vibrational frequency to force them to shapeshift in public. And like I said, if they couldn't say Kinninigan, they were beheaded. Taking forms that were like unto men, slain by the arts, the chiefs of the kingdoms, taking their form and ruling over man. Only by magic could they be discovered. Only by sound could their faces be seen. Sought they from the kingdom of shadows to destroy man and rule in his place. That is still going on today. And I'll show you some reptilian shapeshifters when we get to that part of the video. So obviously, I'm going to show you a map of Atlantis, the correct map here. Like I said, it's not the Atlantis would have existed. I'm going to actually cut and paste. I'm going to, so I can increase this so you can see this along with me, and I'm going to show you a little bit of what the Earth looked like at this time. That is not the video I wanted to click on. Sorry about that. Here we go. Lemuria was a pretty big continent, and I want you to use some common sense and have an open mind about this. Have you ever asked yourself why the continents of Australia, Africa, and the South Pacific literally look like they're still like in the Stone Age? Why they have such a diversity in different plants, animal life, and even like the way they look. And there are parts in the South Pacific that they say essentially look like they stepped out of the Stone Age, that were never changed by time. We have like the Solomon Islands in the South Pacific and all that. And the Asians refer to this continent as Mu, or the motherland, and that is actually a cone in Zen meditation. What is Mu? It was Lemuria, depending how you want to say it. This is where I believe a majority of the native Terrans lived, quite possibly a lot of dinosaurs. It was a massive continent. This would eventually sink into the Pacific Ocean. We do have remnants of Lemuria around today still. This is why I said Africa, and you have parts of the Congo that literally, some people say dinosaurs are still alive there, and some species. The elites have been trying to cover up our world history for a long time. The 10 islands of Atlantis were obviously in the Atlantic Ocean over here. The biggest island being Undal, according to Thoth. This would sink and flood also during the destruction of Maldek. Where, like I said, in the Mariana Trench in the Pacific, we have the evidence. There is a scar on Earth, and that's what the Mariana Trench is. That pretty much proves this. And that was hit by the ice comet known as Venus. In the next chapter, we'll go over the creation of our galaxy and how they actually destroyed Maldek. This is an interesting topic that I just made a video on. Yes, there was a crystal pyramid discovered in the Bermuda Triangle. It was seen by a diver back in the 60s. A diver went inside this pyramid and said that he saw two copper hands that were holding a crystal that went up to, it looked like gold, he said, to a rod. And what this crystal pyramid was used for, I believe, was probably the Atlanteans were using it to do such things as astral project themselves into different parts of the cosmos or what have you. Crystal is a very powerful element, but this crystal pyramid is in the Bermuda Triangle, which the whole Caribbean is remnants of ancient Atlantis and the 10 islands. This got covered up though, and they deny that this thing is still there, this pyramid made out of solid crystal, but it's built the exact same way as the pyramid complex in Giza. And this is in the Bermuda Triangle, and was probably one of the pyramids on one of the islands of Atlantis. Thoth, after the sinking of the mother country and the other survivors of Atlantis, would go to North Africa, to the land that he would call Kemet. Now he claims that when he lands on Africa, he called it the land of the hairy barbarians. I think he's referring to Neanderthal, where he would build the pyramids of Giza and set up and bring the hairy barbarians to a high degree of civilization. Now this is not dynastic Egypt we're talking about. This is not the Pharisees. The Pharisees are more than likely reptilian. There are no hieroglyphs in the Great Pyramid. However, Thoth says that he put a crystal in the apex of the Pyramid of Giza, which is the exact same thing that was found in the crystal pyramid found in the Caribbean, which is very interesting. I believe, that he built this pyramid complex to open a Stargate. And this theory was actually mocked in all things the movie Stargate. We had more or less a reptilian shapeshifter taking the form of an Egyptian pharaoh, human form. At the end of the movie, you do see they make him out to be like an alien gray, but they were, and in the Stargate TV series, if you remember the episode Thor's Hammer, Thor would put this piece of, and I believe it was Organite they were referring to, in front of Stargates to keep the reptilians from coming through. Now the reptilians obviously would bore themselves into a human host and assume that form. That falls right in line with the idea of reptilian shapeshifters. But at the end of the movie of Stargate, what did they do at the end? They send a nuclear device back through the Stargate and blow it up. The Great Pyramids are missing their casing stones as well as the capstone also. I believe the capstone, more than likely, was probably gold or something. They say the casing stones were taken off the pyramids by Muslims building mosques. I don't buy that mainstream. I believe the casing stones, and the land of Kemet, when Thoth came here, was tropical. The Nile Valley was tropical at one time, and I believe after this device was sent back through the Stargate so they couldn't follow him, is when we get the desert now. And it's often theorized that a lot of the deserts that we have on this planet were from ancient wars, and that is actually talked about in Hindu mythology, especially with the Vemanas. And I believe that great war between the Atlanteans was also going, and it's retold in different ancient civilizations. For the most part, I'm going to stick with the one that Thoth tells us, and we'll go with that. But I am aware it does go in line with Hindu mythology too. In these great wars, when their own city of like Dwarka sank into the ocean, and we have Zeus and the Great Flood. I've made a video about multiple rises and falls. Now, in Plato, I'm looking at the date here. Yeah, Plato's Atlantis goes back 11,500 years, and I'm gonna no, this is a civilization. Like I said, it was probably a lot older than that. So the Alpha Draconians obviously come from, this is the Alpha Draconian star system, also known as Thuban in Arabic, which means the snake. The word serpent, the Latin meaning of the word serpent is serpens, which means a snake with a heightened sense of intelligence. That is the Latin root of the word serpent. And we still use the word, well, Draco is the root of the word dragon, where you get draconian and stuff like that. It's always a reference to Draco or Draco, and that's why we call them the Alpha Draconians. We're referring to the star systems they come from, and they embrace that name too. They call themselves the dragon. This is where the root of the word dragon comes from. So obviously these Alpha Draconians saw the Atlanteans and the civilization they stood for as a threat to them. So they infiltrate Atlantis as shapeshifters. They're discovered. They start to get beheaded after the challenge to say Kinninigan in front of people. So then the Alpha Draconians would do something a little more sinister. They would retaliate and destroy the planet of Maldek and sink Atlantis. And how they did that, I'm going to cover in the next chapter. So how did the Alpha Draconians destroy Maldek? Surprisingly too, we actually have evidence for this if you have an open mind. Regardless of what other people might say, space is very real, and there are some anomalies in our own solar system which actually prove this. They hurled an ice comet at Maldek. This ice comet is also known as the planet Venus. This is why Venus is so revered in Luciferian occult circles and known as the light bearer. Venus is not native to our solar system, and science has more or less proven that yes, at one time it was an ice comet. It shows all the characteristics of being an ice comet. Got some interesting things here. If anyone's ever seen the surface of Venus, in 1983, Russia sent an unmanned probe to Venus. They filmed some of the surface. These are some of the pics here. And then these were like, there you go. And Venus shows all the characteristics of being an ice comet that is cooling down. Hence why it has heavy, um, a lot of moisture in the air and a lot of clouds on it, because it was at one time ice. This event that also, there's some interesting things with Venus. First of all, it spins in a reverse rotation than all the other planets, which is very strange in itself. It also forms a pentagram throughout the night sky throughout the year. That's why it's symbolized by the pentagram. Now, what's interesting is, many people know, our solar system as it is today, the Alpha Draconians probably sent the ice comet here through a wormhole. And when it entered our galaxy, it did a few things that caused anomalies, of all things. Uranus, that planet is on a tilted axis. So as it comes into our solar system, it would affect Uranus and put it on a tilted axis. It would continue moving through the solar system. And then what it would do, Mars is thought to have been inhabited at that time. Maldek is where the asteroid belt is currently. This is the remnants of Maldek. We obviously have the asteroid belt, which is why the planet was a lot bigger at one time. And what would happen with the planet as it cracks is it would reform itself. And it reformed into a smaller planet. Now, a lot of the asteroid belt will tell us a lot about ancient civilization, even at the times of Maldek and Atlantis. But interestingly, there are no missions to go out to the asteroid belt and see what kind of things the things that are probably frozen in space in the asteroid belt would probably be mind-boggling, including dinosaurs, Atlanteans, native Terrans, and a whole slew of other things. The biggest asteroid in the asteroid belt was given the Roman name Ceres. If you're not familiar, that is one of the larger asteroids, but I'm even surprised that they never even put like unmanned probes to go out and do some investigation of the asteroid belt. Probably because they know what they would find, and they've been trying to cover up the real history of Earth. And we'll talk about that, and who else was complicit in that were some of the proxies of Rome also. England, Spain, and France mostly. And we'll talk about that in a minute, what I mean by that. So as this ice comet comes into the solar system, probably put here with, open up with a wormhole, it would put Uranus on a tilted axis. It would pull the atmosphere off of Mars. There's also been a video I made on my channel. There is a theory going around that some of the refugees of Mars after their planet was destroyed came to and settled on all places Antarctica. This was a species known as Homo capensis, and they were refugees from Mars that came to the Earth because obviously it was the only inhabitable planet in the solar system now. Maldek was 5 times the size of what Earth is today. I believe it was theorized to be 55,000 square miles, and most of that became the asteroid belt. It is also at this time that Venus, after it hits Maldek, it would start to slow down and it would get pulled into the sun's orbit and start spinning in a reverse rotation than the other planets. And it would start to cool off, and that's why we have a lot of the cloud formation on Venus and all that. And it is not native to this solar system, and scientists have. So there's been quite a few theories. The comet Venus, and it's been. What's interesting is a lot of ancient civilizations say at one time Venus had a tail. That would also be very a sign that it was a comet that was cooling down, and a tail that, as it goes into orbit and all that. It's also this time which we get another interesting thing here. This is the Sumerian dragon myth of creation. And not only do I'm going to show you this here, we have another tablet from the Sumerians called the creation of the sun and moon, and it has been theorized that the moon was put into place by the Giza, or the reptilians themselves, and that is a Probably a way that they travel throughout space is hollowed out asteroids or planets, moons, ice comets, or what have you. And it's the last line of what this tablet is talking about is Mamu Tiamat as someone who will slay the dragon being Maldek. And they say Tiamat was the dragon. Now, Earth is often referred to as Tiamat by the Sumerians, just remember that. I've read this tablet before on my, the border of the moon god. But what's interesting, it says, go Tissue, slay the dragon. I believe Tissue is a direct reference to Venus, the ice comet. And Venus slaying the dragon is when Maldek crashed into the Earth. Where that impact happened is the Mariana Trench in the Pacific Ocean. But what's even more interesting, for 3 years and 3 months, 1 day and 1 night, the blood of the dragon flowed. To me, that sounds like the amount of time they probably would have needed before Marduk can eventually come down and set up Babylon and set up modern civilization. Probably for these 3 years and 3 months is when survivors of Atlantis and this great catastrophe, such as Thoth, go to the land of Kem in Africa and start building the Great Pyramid and the civilization of Kem. Sumeria is a lot older than what I think mainstream archaeologists are telling us for that reason. I don't believe the real timelines of history they tell us. But this is the 7 tablets of creation from the Sumerians. Like I said, I'll put all the links in the description. And this talks about Mamu Tiamat. She was the hive queen, the dragon queen. And she creates the Ajiji gods. And then we get the Sumerian kings list. I'll show you that. And that has a history that goes back 240,000 years, which is why I believe the what they tell us about Sumeria is not entirely true, and I believe it's a lot older than we think. And if you know anything about what the elite do, why do you think the Middle East is a war-torn area right now? They don't want people investigating these ancient sites. So a lot of like these, it's the cradle of civilization. Same thing with a lot of ancient history in Africa. Very dangerous to travel to parts of that country. The Congo comes to mind, where I said they theorize that dinosaurs are still living in the Lakoya swamp, I believe. It's one of the biggest swamps on Earth, and they said it's literally right out of the Stone Age. Some of the creatures in there and all that. So, with these addendums, not only do we have the creation of Babylon by Marduk. We'll look at that one and talk about the rise of Babylon. But then we also have a creation of the sun and moon. Now, obviously, we know they didn't create the sun. But Anna, Enlil, and Enki, these are the Ajiji, the ones who would eventually create the Anunnaki. And they have an addended tablet, the reappearance of the moon and the creation of the month, where they create the moon and they create the lunar cycles. Pretty interesting, and that's why I theorize that the moon was probably pulled into place at this time. And in the midst of heaven and earth, they duly created him. So even the Sumerians have mythology about them creating the moon. The moon also, it's a lot different than other satellites going around other planets. And we don't really get a great deal of truth about the moon. I know you can make jokes about the moon landing all you want and all that, but it's long been theorized that the moon is hollow and inside it is inhabited by archons, quite possibly, and the Ajiji, for all we know. That's why it's so revered in the occult. So this idea of the 5th planet is not anything new. It's been theorized. I'm not the first one to come up with it. It's right here on Wikipedia. It's the 5th planet hypothesis, that there was a much larger planet in our solar system. Something crashed into it, the ice comet Venus. It cracked. It creates the asteroid belt. And like I said, as that comet comes into the solar system, it put Uranus on a tilted axis and pulled the atmosphere off Mars. Some of the Martian refugees, Homo capensis, are theorized to even come to the Earth and settle in Antarctica as a refugee race. No one's ever just put the idea together. The only I will give credit to Stuart Swerlow. Actually sub to his YouTube channel. I watch him and his wife all the time. He is the one that I first got the original idea of the Venus. Well, I already knew that it was an ice comet and had characteristics of an ice comet, but the idea that Venus was hurled in here by the Draco themselves, crashes into Maldek, and obviously this would have caused the sinking of Atlantis and the destruction of Lemuria. Russia is only one of the few countries that's ever sent a probe to Venus to go check it out. Very strange, right? They claim that this was like some creature they filmed on the surface. It's pretty strange. Also, the idea of panspermia might have happened at this time also. That some of the life on Venus, when it cracks into our Earth, take for example Venus flytrap. I made a video about that. That is from meteor strikes, possibly part of this destruction here as it crashes into Maldek. And they only exist on one part of the planet in South Carolina, in a certain part of a swamp where these ancient meteor strikes happen. And it's also theorized that such creatures such as the octopus, squid, and cuttlefish came here through panspermia. So Venus itself could have, yeah, quite possibly brought some life with it on Earth, and that's the idea of panspermia. There's no disputing that the Mariana Trench itself is a huge scar on Earth, and if you actually look at a picture of Earth with the oceans off of it, it's like kind of geode shape. And so ancient Lemuria, this is the South Pacific here, obviously Australia was probably at one time part of Lemuria, and we get these island chains all throughout the South Pacific. There are thousands of islands. The Caribbean, obviously, I thought I had some images pulled up here, is part of ancient Atlantis, so all the islands within the Caribbean. Now, I was talking about England and France and Spain, of all things. Have you ever wondered why all islands in the South Pacific and even in the Caribbean either have French, Spanish, English, or French names? It's my theory that the elites, being used by proxies of Rome, we'll talk about Rome last, we're going around to all these islands in search of remnants or any evidences of ancient civilizations, trying to cover it up. There are places in the South Pacific, like the Solomon Islands, for example. I've made a video about the Solomon Islands that still have giants living on them. And these giants were encountered in all things during World War II. I believe these giants that are on the Solomon Islands and other places throughout the world that have seen them were native probably to Maldek. And this is why I said the planet was bigger, the hominoids were bigger. Some of them survived. And there are species of plants and animals that don't exist anywhere else on Earth. Hello, Australia. Australia's probably got, and next to Africa, the diversity of wildlife, obviously. There's a lot of red flags there when you look at the animals, the plants, and just even the landscapes of Africa and Australia. And it's my belief these were parts of a much bigger ancient continent at one time. The remnants of Lemuria we get in the South Pacific, obviously. And then we have the Mariana Trench, which was the scar where the ice comet actually hit Earth. Now the Caribbean, this is right around where that crystal pyramid was found in the Caribbean. Obviously, these all these islands here all throughout the Caribbean would have been remnants of ancient Atlantis, parts that didn't sink into the ocean. And Thoth even talks about Atlantis sinking into the ocean in the Emerald Tablets, so that kind of correlates together also. And then, like I said, in conjunction with that, you have the Sumerian myths of creation, where they talk about Tiamat being destroyed, or Tiamat destroying Tishu, destroying Tiamat, the dragon. I believe Tishu is a direct reference to Venus. So And like I said, we have the evidence in the solar system that what put Uranus on a tilted axis, what pulled the atmosphere off Mars, and the only thing that makes sense is, yeah, they hurled an ice comet, cracks into Maldek, sinks Atlantis, and they would, as per their creation myth, just give me a second, I got a police helicopter over my head, that's why it's very noisy. People make comments about my chat. I use a very high-end Sennheiser mic, and yeah, I have noise canceling software, so it's nothing to do with my mic. It's so I can cut out that noise. You won't hear the police helicopter in my video, though. It just went by. It's a pain sometimes. So, we have a lot of evidence correlating with this theory of Venus coming into the solar system as an ice comet hurled here by the Draco to take out Maldek after they were discovered in Atlantis as reptilian shapeshifters and exposed. So they figured they would just destroy Atlantis, and that's exactly what they did. What's very scary about this gives you an idea of how evil these reptilians really are, to just take out a whole entire civilization with a comet, and don't think they don't want to do it again. Yeah, we've all heard about Agenda 21, the plan to end 90% of the world's population because we're becoming too big for them to control. And believe me, don't not put it past these reptilians. They've done it before, and they're going to attempt to do it again. How they stay in power? Well, that's going to be the next chapter, the rise of Babylon. We're going to talk about the Igigi and the Anunnaki and some of their ancient civilizations they set up, and why, of all things, did they choose to go with the Greco-Roman way of ruling, and how is Rome still in power today? And I am even going to give you a theory on where Rome went during the quote-unquote Dark Ages, the 1,000 years of missing history that we have. Now, when did this actually happen, the creation of the asteroid belt, the destruction of Maldek? I believe we're actually looking at something that goes back quite possibly over 1 million years ago. And that's probably how old the pyramids are in the Giza complex also. They've never really given you... According to the Real and the Emerald tablets, they said the history of Atlantis goes back 36,000 years, but that's too early. We have other ancient civilizations, such as like in Hindu mythology, that tell stories that go back at least 1 million years, especially with Rama's Bridge. And so I believe the original destruction of Atlantis was probably over 1 million years ago. The Greeks and Plato, probably ruled by reptilians, of course they're going to know about the real history, but they plagiarize it. And they kind of put this embedded image of Atlantis as being this kind of Greco-Roman kind of place with Poseidon and all that stuff. Yes, I've seen the Aquaman movie, I know. Not exactly what the Atlanteans were. Atlantis, I believe, was an idea of a whole civilization on Maldek at that time. And they obviously coexisted with the native Terrans who were on that planet, who are descended from the dinosaurs, actually. And they fled to the underground. Some of the Atlanteans, other ones, fled into the hollow earth, and some of them escaped in a Stargate. And yeah, like I said, the fifth planet hypothesis and how the asteroid belt was formed has been around for quite a long time. Because really, you got to think about it. The asteroid belt itself is massive. And that's why they think, well, I think, that planet Earth is probably only 1/5 the size of what it used to be. And most of our old planet is in the asteroid belt. After it strikes, and as per the creation myth here, when they have to wait 3 years before they can come down and set up Babylon, it's probably, that would have caused a lot of devastation. This might also be why, now, Lucifer is referred to as the planet Venus. And Lucifer is referred to as the god of music also. I always wondered if that was a reference of the sound it would have made as it was approaching Earth and hitting Atlantis, because it would have made a lot of noise. I think there's a lot of associations with the mythology there. And then obviously they moved the moon into place. Very interesting. It's theorized too that we can, that they might have, and the reason why no other good civilizations have come to help us, because they use the moon. If the moon goes out of orbit, it'll be devastating on Earth because it controls the tides. There would be a lot of massive flooding all over the globe if anything happened to the moon or it moved in its place because of the effect it has on the tides on Earth. So that could be another sinister way and why other civilizations out in the cosmos have not helped us yet. But there is some hope because in the Emerald Tablets, Thoth says when Earthmen learn how to harness the power of thunder, or I believe he's referring to possibly even nuclear weapons, that we would go to war with each other, World War III, Armageddon, another reoccurring mythological theme, and that the Space Brothers and the Atlanteans would rise and come and save us. Kind of like the same allegory we get with Jesus and the Second Coming. This is very important because it ties into some of the way that Rome has stayed in power for so long, and the ways that they hijacked all these things to stay in power. Starts with Babylon, but Babylon was just the beginning of their civilization. They would create Egypt, the reptilians, and Greece and Rome, of all things, as well as other. Now, and like I said, throughout the what you're seeing, like all the islands here that are named after Rome, Roman proxies of England, France, and Spain. Spain and Rome have very close ties. The Roman short sword was a gladius. That's a Spanish short sword. As I believe they were still, to this day, they did it under the guise of England. England used to have a phrase, the sun never sets on the English Empire, because they pretty much owned a lot of the world, right? Well, these, I believe, are proxies of Rome, and Rome was still going around the world making sure they can cover up all evidences of ancient civilizations. And that goes well with a lot of stuff that they're hiding in the Vatican vaults, of all things. And the equivalent of the Vatican in the United States for our ancient history, for example, would be the basement of the Smithsonian, which is probably just another proxy arm of the Vatican. So anyway, that's how the reptilians came in, and I'll put this link in the description too. This is not something, this is just talking about Maldek and the possibility. This is where I got that plate from for the silver tongue. Very interesting read if you're interested, though. There's been a few theories. Maldek and Milana theorized planets. The word Lucifer comes up, Latin word light bringing, yeah. Or the planet Venus when it happens as the morning star as they do. And it goes into a little mythology of Venus and why it was called the light bringer. So next chapter, we're going to talk about the rise of Babylon, the Giza and the Anunnaki, and the Alpha Draconian reptilians. Okay, welcome to the second half of the video. The rise of Babylon, the Giza and the Anunnaki. This is an infamous wall relief right here of one of the Anunnaki. They're always pictured as having these bird-like heads too. That's very important for the story that I'm about to tell you in this second half. Follow the eagle. And I'm going to show you how the Anunnaki are still ruling over us. Now, I often tell people that these Alpha Draconian reptilians that have come here from the Alpha Draco star system look more like the Skeksis off the Dark Crystal, and that Jim Henson was telling us a story in his infamous Dark Crystal movie, and the idea of lost feeding, where they were draining the essence of life out of podlings for immortality. People ask me why, well, what are they doing here? Why are they in power so long? Well, they feed off negative energy. They're negative energy parasites. So to raise a human civilization up as a slave race to them, create wars, murder. They also bring black magic, and all black magic can be rooted from Babylon. That's, there's no secret there. Thoth talks about this when the magicians in Atlantis started adding angles to the magic circle and summoning the hounds of the barrier. It's pretty interesting because they use black magic to rule over us still. And this is why they attack Christianity, But in a strange way, they embraced Christianity through the Vatican. We'll get into Rome in the last part of the video. But then now, because they had too many people that were Christian, they're trying to muddy the waters again, hence the rise of occultism in the 20th century. Where they send in prophets from time to time. I call them prophets. They're not really prophets. People like Aleister Crowley and Anton LaVey. And there was a huge, resurgence of the occult in the early 19th century where they wanted to get people into the mystic arts again. And just look at all the divide and conquer. What happens in Babylon is very interesting because it's more of, it is the cradle of civilization, but I believe Babylon itself is a lot older than they say. But for anyone who's not familiar, I'm going to show you one of these shape-shifting reptilians right now. This is my Yusef Estes shapeshift. Won't hear any volume. I got the volume down, but I just want to show you. This is probably one of the best shape shifts on my video. You'll notice right there when he shifts, he's got a very Skeksis looking head right here. You see the two eyes that are offset. And this is a reptilian shapeshifter. What's interesting about Yusef Estes is he is an Islamic missionary who worked for the UN and US prisons to convert prisoners to Islam. That's part of the divide and conquer tactics they've been using. They do it with sex, politics, religion, and this is why Thoth said they infiltrated into key political figures and inside of Atlantis, where they were killing them, assuming their human form, and they strategically put themselves in places where they can rule over people and create a lot of negative archonic energy. They don't want everyone on Earth practicing the same spiritual beliefs. They don't want everyone looking the same color. They don't want everyone speaking the same language. That's how a lot of humans become ignorant towards each other. It's just through cultural differences, our languages, and that's all by design. That's the Tower of Babel incident, where the Sumerians say, let us confuse their language so they cannot communicate with each other. This is one of the early designs of the Skeksis done by, of all people, Jim Henson, which I believe he changed the design a little bit in the movie, but this is more or less what I believe the reptilians look like. And it's kind of metaphoric what Henson did with these Skeksis, where he puts them in these big robes, but when the robes are taken off, like with Chamberlain in the movie, they're not very big, and so they put these robes on to make themselves look big and majestic. Henson kind of shied away from that idea of giving them these big ceremonial robes in the movie. Now, how these reptilians shapeshift, there is a lecture on my channel. I'll go over it briefly, but if you want a more in-depth thing, like I said, there'll be a link in my description to my playlist. There's an element out there called Han Purple. It's an actual element. What's interesting is purple's always associated with royalty. Well, Han Purple is an element that the terracotta warriors in China that were unearthed are all covered in Han Purple. What's interesting about Han Purple is when you bring the temperature down real low to a freezing level and add a magnetic field to it, it drops itself in a waveform. It goes from being three-dimensional to two-dimensional, and it drops a wave in dimension. This is how a fourth-dimensional entity utilizing Han Purple could actually shapeshift into a human. I go over all the science of it in that video. Hence, why purple has always been associated with royalty. And it's the idea that they can manipulate human DNA. These holographic forms that they take, they look like a human, they talk like humans. They have the ability to, when they do the shapeshifting, to rematerialize human matter. And sometimes they lose their form, as seen in this video. And it's thought that they have to consciously hold their forms. And then we get what's happening to Yusef here. Now, the shapeshift happens fast. Here's a thumbnail right there in this video. But this is one of the better ones that is on my channel. And Yeah, that's not actually the Draco eyes. Their eyes are more offset like an octopus, but here is just one of the images I want to show you here. A lot of people with this shapeshift. In this image here, you can actually see right through his head and see the background behind him. That is impossible, considering that, this was a three-dimensional person. We shouldn't be able to see the background behind him as he's shifting, and we do. So he loses his human holographic form here in his head. We get the reptilian head start to materialize, and then he realizes it and goes back into his native, human form. Whenever I refer to the Illuminati, this is who I'm referring to here, the Alpha Draconian shapeshifters, the ones who look like the Skeksis. Now a little more on Babylon, because this is interesting. Babylon is set up by Marduk. Marduk is one of the Agigi gods, and there's 8 to 10 of them thought to be in here. Now these Agigi gods are created by, I have here a Sumerian kings list, and we also have genealogy of Mesopotamian gods, and these tie in with the Babylonian 7 tablets of creation. The first tablet deals with a lot of these names up here. Namu, Anu, that's the beginning of Anunnaki. That's where it's 2 words put together, Anunnaki. It's he who from heaven, earth came. I know it's a little backwards sounding. We get Kingu, Tiamat, Abzu, and Enki or / Ea, Ninsun, and Lugalbanda. These are the Agigi. These are all created by a deity called Mamu. She is the highest one in Mamu Tiamat to be. She is the dragon queen. So it's kind of like a hive-like mentality. I don't believe that the Alpha Draconians came here in mass. They came here, for all we know, Mamu traveled in that ice comet known as Venus when she came, inside of it, or inside of the moon. She would create the Agigi gods, and kind of like the same exact way a queen bee would be with a beehive, and then all the others below her are the worker bees. Marduk comes down and he creates infamous Babylon in his own tablet of creation. He creates the Tigris and Euphrates River with his sperm. It's how it's written in the tablet. In the Indus Valley, otherwise known as ancient Mesopotamia, 300 Anunnaki are created by the Agigi to rule over the different jurisdictions of Babylon. And this is the way that they would rule over us going up all the way to this day. Each jurisdiction is ruled by its own Anunnaki who has its own temple set up to worship it. These entities are summoned through sorcery, and they start Babylon. The teachings of Babylon can be found, and they were carried on in all texts of Babylonian Talmud. Now the Pharisees, I believe, were some of the original Anunnaki. The Pharisees are not exactly who you think they are, and their history has been shrouded in mystery. Yes, they formed Judaism. It was the Pharisees who got Jesus Christ condemned and crucified. That ties a little more into the story of Rome and how Rome hijacks religion for power eventually. But the Babylonian Talmud carries a lot of these pagan mystical beliefs in it that come right from Sumeria, and they're very disturbing. The Babylonian Talmud promotes everything from pedophilia to murdering of all non-goy. So the closest thing that we have to the actual religion that was practiced in Sumeria is a group of, you may remember them, the Yazidi that were almost all killed off by ISIS. The Yazidi practice one of the oldest religions on the planet, and it's a religion that comes right out of Sumeria, and their symbol is the peacock, and they carry down it's one of the oldest religions on earth that was practiced in Babylon. The closest thing that we probably have to that is Babylonian Talmud, like I said, but I believe that the reptilians in Babylon, after they confused our languages, they start to spread human civilization out as they create the humans on the newly found Earth after the destruction of Maldek, when they could finally come down and land. Marduk does this. Enki is the chief engineer of the Ajiji. He comes down and builds some of the cities, including Nibiru, his own city. So what the reptilians would decide to do is span out, and we get other ancient civilizations that pop up seemingly out of nowhere with advanced knowledge. And now I'm talking not about the land of Kemet, where Thoth settled, but we get dynastic Egypt, Rome, Greece. We get civilizations spawning off in Asia. And as these civilizations spread out, they're all given a different pantheon. The reptilians make themselves into living gods, and that's how they would rule over the world. They did it as the pharaohs in Egypt. They did it as the emperors in Rome. This is the way that they would rule human civilization, off these Babylonian way of civilization. This is what I mean, hence the rise of Babylon, because we're still under this way. We have jurisdictions now to this day. That's the same. Every jurisdiction is run by, every state is run by, well, every city has a mayor, every state has a senator. You get the idea. Every country has a prime minister, president, what have you. Some have a king, but it's more or less monarchical rule. That's the idea that one king and queen could rule over a whole bunch of people, and what they say is the law of the land. And that's the way that these reptilians would rule over Earth, going all the way back to Babylon. They will infiltrate, just as Thoth said, the key positions of power where they can do the most damage. So that's why, yeah, U.S. presidents, politicians, high religious leaders such as the Vatican, and they would manipulate human civilization with politics, religion, throughout history, and they still do it. They feed off the negative energy that they do they cause by doing this, known as lust feeding. Like I said, they're negative energy parasites. But one big clue is their biggest symbol. Now this is really important. These are one of the wall reliefs of the Anunnaki in Sumeria. Why they were given bird heads, no mainstream archaeologist has ever given a good answer on that one, right? And why they have wings. This is them, obviously, in their human form. Because this would become their new symbol. That's SPQR, Senators and Peoples of the Republic of Rome. The eagle is also our national symbol. Most countries use, Russia has the double phoenix. It's an avian symbol, a bird symbol, more or less. Or for example, in Egypt, they used the snake as their symbol, which is, I'm going to do another video about Egypt and the Pharisees and their connections to the pharaohs in the future. Don't worry about that. But this is really important because we're given this illusion that, all these civilizations were independent, they were all free, but they're not. They're all modeled off the same Babylonian way of paganism and monarchical rule. I don't think that Atlanteans would have had kings that ruled over them like we have people ruling. They weren't a slave race. This is why the Draconians, after they took over Earth, make us into more or less a slave race. We would also get the Code of Hammurabi that comes out of Babylon. That is all the laws that the Anunnaki wrote. 300 laws. There's 300 of them. And they're all laws on how to take for human slaves. There were slave laws. Pretty interesting, right? And we're still under slavery today. I don't think you're not. All roads lead to Rome, and I'll explain to you why. As civilizations spread out in ancient times, with these reptilian shapeshifters usually at the forefront of them as kings, queens, or what have you. Most of them were monarchies back then. A lot of the ancient mythology I cover with different pantheons of gods can more or less, they're interchangeable. I could take You know, in the Roman pantheon, Jupiter is their highest god. Well, that would be akin to Mamu or Enlil in Sumeria, and they just changed the names of the gods. So they spread out across Earth, and they give people religion, gods and goddesses, mainly paganism. And we have other civilizations that spin up besides Babylon. Egypt comes to mind, Greece, and Rome. And I believe that they were playing around with the ideas of what would be the best way to rule over humans and what kind of civilization should it be. Should it be like Egypt? Should it be like Rome? Should it be like, well, Babylon obviously didn't work because Babylon fell. It was conquered by Alexander the Great, of all people. And I find that highly interesting because I think it's a metaphor of the way they wanted to take human civilization. Hence why Egypt was taken down by the Greeks, and Alexander the Great conquered half of the known world. Then we would get Rome start conquering the world. And I'll tell the story about Rome in the last part of this video. But it seems that they adopted kind of the Roman, and we still, we have like civil courts. That comes from Roman civil law, even here in the United States. They used these proxy countries to spread out, and I believe so they ditched the idea of Egyptian civilization. They ditched the idea of Babylon, of rolling over people like with paganism, and they try to put a little more order to it. Now, also Rome lies on a very big occult ley line. That's where the Vatican is. So the Roman emperors, obviously, they would have been reptilian shapeshifters. This is Rome's logo, the eagle, which looks exactly like the Anunnaki. And this is still the symbol they use to let you know that you are under reptilian rule to this day. No surprise there. And it was no surprise that, you know, Jim Henson was even making these very bird-like looking Skeksis in his movies. So we have the Gigi gods. Marduk is right here. He comes down, the king of gods for Babylon. He creates Babylon, which technically was the first civilization on Earth. And Babylon comes out of nowhere with a high degree of, I don't know, well, Baghdad is modern day Babylon. And I find it like highly suspicious that we have two Gulf Wars, you know, within the span of, what, 10 years. The first Gulf War was in 91, then we go back after 9/11, and it's theorized that they were taking ancient artifacts out of Babylon that would have proved our real history. And they've been doing that a lot all around the world. This is why I said, like, we have Spain and England going around to all the islands in the Caribbean and the South Pacific, and why they all have Spanish and English names, because they were landing on these islands and looking for any remnants of ancient civilization that they can cover up or couldn't explain. Because in the mysteries of how the Babylonians come out of the Stone Age and build the cities that were in ancient Mesopotamia, including the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Yeah, how the cavemen just rise up and build stuff like the pyramids and the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. So obviously, the reptilians are not, they are evil, but they also have some intelligence as far as building things and getting across space and space travel, the ability to shapeshift and change their forms and all this. However, they are, I believe, like I said, they attack Atlantis because they see Atlantis as a threat. So then that's why they attack Maldek. They wait a few years, they come down, they set up Babylon. 300 original Anunnaki are created by the Gigi, who rule over different jurisdictions, and then human civilization starts to spread out. And we get paganism everywhere back then. Everyone had gods and goddesses, and those were just different names for the same Anunnaki. Now, here's like a list of, they got a lot of the Anunnaki on this website here at the University of Pennsylvania, but the mother goddess is the one I'm talking about here. She was Nimma, or she would be akin to Gaia in the Greek pantheon, the mother goddess. in the seven tablets of creation, they refer to a deity called Mamu Tiamat. That's who I believe they're talking about here. And it says in those tablets, she's the one who bore them all. So I think it's like a hive kind of mentality. Now, are there more than 300 Anunnaki on Earth today? It is quite possible. If they created, if human civilization gets bigger for them, they may have to create more to rule over us. Human civilization on Earth is around 7 billion people. It's a lot more than in the times of ancient Sumeria. Now, like I said, the playlist will be in my description, but I did do another documentary before on the serpent and dragon gods in ancient mythology, and it was a reoccurring theme with the serpent worship all throughout every ancient civilization. I literally go around the world and show you from China, India, the New World, America, Europe, and it's all intertwined with serpent worship. And I ask people, where does all this idea of serpent worship come from? And the dragon, the mythical creature, but we have an Alpha Draco star system, and the word Draco is a direct reference to them. And they're always talking about these entities when they're talking about that. University of Pennsylvania, obviously here, is not going to go say, yeah, well, the Anunnaki are reptilian. They're just going to give you some of the mythology on the names of the gods and all that. And this is still how they operate today. Anyone who, like I said, is a beacon of light doing anything good for civilization is quickly shut up, by the Illuminati. And when I say Illuminati, obviously this is who I'm referring to, the shape-shifting reptilians that set up Babylon. I've done quite a few videos on reptilians, not only just anomaly videos, but lectures on the Anunnaki themselves. So I think that they had a few ancient civilizations they tried out. They weren't working out too well. They fall. We get the metaphorical story of Alexander the Great, who not only conquers Egypt, but tears down the Tower of Babel in Babylon. And I think that was not saying he didn't do it, but I think it was more of a metaphor for the direction they would now take human civilization. And we split off. The West, even in China, their emperors were known as dragon emperors. And there's a lot of tombs of emperors in China that have, for example, Mercury in it. And Mercury is one of the things required, I think I forgot to mention that, in conjunction with Han Purple to make the shape-shifting work. And they found tombs in, I don't think I've made that video yet. That would be a good one. There's an Aztec temple that they found recently with pools of Mercury in it also. So I believe that was one of the ways they were manifesting down from the fourth dimension into this one, is the use of Han Purple and Mercury of all things. And these ancient emperors in China are known as the dragon emperors, and I went over that in that documentary. And then the East and West kind of splits off, and this is part of the divide and conquer I was saying earlier on how they divide and conquer different civilizations. Now, Rome actually started out with a king. We'll get into the foundations of Rome. There's another metaphor with the, and I'm going to get into the wolf symbolism at Rome too, with the two brothers. We'll talk about Rome in the last part of the video. And there's another metaphor going on there, because the wolf is one of the 7 evil spirits out of Sumeria. That's why it's also featured in, of all things, the Vikings' Ragnarok. So one of the ways I've been able to decode reptilians still rolling over modern civilizations is I just follow the symbols. And I say follow the eagle because it's one of the easier ones to see, but there are some other symbols if you know what to look for. These reptilians always use avian symbols, and symbolism is very important to them, even to the elites and Illuminati today. We all know that. They love their symbols. But I believe a few of the other civilizations they tried out was not working too well. Eventually they would embrace Rome, and that would become the powerhouse of modern civilization. And in the last part of this video, I'm going to pretty much prove to you we are still under Roman rule, and quite possibly where Rome relocated to. Rome never fell. Our tax money that we pay is just tribute to Rome. It all goes to Rome. They still get their money, and that's how the laws worked in ancient Sumeria with the Anunnaki. They had the citizens of Sumer had to give offerings to the gods. This is why, according to the Vatican, as a Catholic, we're supposed to give 10% of our income to the Catholic Church. And it's extortion, yeah. And this is how, because they figured out a few ways to stay in power. One is through the creation of money, or a monetary system, which I don't think any intelligent civilization in the universe would have money at all. They would barter for goods, you know. Africa would say, hey, you give us some stuff we need, we'll give you some diamonds. You know, actually, if we went by our resources, Africa would be the world's superpower. That's why England went into Africa, and England is another proxy of Rome. We'll talk about that. Londinium was set up by the Romans as the administrative branch of Rome right before they went into hiding. But we're going to talk about Rome. And it's so I believe in ancient times they tried out a few different variations of ways to rule over people. And this paganism, Babylonian serpent worship, is still going on today by especially the elite Luciferians. Everything in the occult revolves around dragon or serpent symbolism. No surprise there. And they eventually are the ones who bring back all black magic. Can be rooted from Babylon. Babylon was heavily occultic, and the foundation of all modern occult schools and all that can be all traced back to Babylon. It's Babylonian sorcery, more or less. And Thoth actually speaks against the Dark Brothers who brought black magic here, talking about the reptilians. The Anunnaki, when I refer to the Illuminati, if I'm correct on where Rome actually is, where their stronghold is, it's going to be a little shocking to some people, because before I get into the last part, I want you to think of one country on this planet that never gets involved in politics. They're never in the news. They're never talked about any time. And their flag is the international symbol for power. Yeah, it gets a little interesting, because it's my belief that all this, I call it destruction by design, all this and divide and conquer stuff, it gets even worse. Like, I mean, all the wars that were started, I believe reptilians are at the root of it, because humans really don't want to kill each other or go to war, or, you know, all this other stuff that they make us engage in. And that's all, and it all revolves around their parasitic loss feeding, and that's why they kept human civilization going on for so long. But hopefully we can get these idiots off our planet and take our planet back. They're already doing a good job destroying our planet. They destroyed Maldek, but they're destroying this planet with pollution and plastic and nuclear radiation, what have you. So they obviously don't care about the planet, but we need to get them off the planet. So that's why I always had an interest in finding out what really happened to Rome. Everyone thinks Rome just becomes the Vatican and turns into a part of Italy. No, that's not true at all. They are still in power. So in the next part of the video, we're going to talk a little bit about Rome. Like I said, if you want some more in-depth lectures on the Anunnaki, there's plenty of videos on my channel. I'll put the link in the description for the playlist. Okay, welcome to the last part of the video. Now, Rome, the continuing on of Babylon. This in itself is probably should be its own video topic, so I'm only going to touch on this stuff briefly, because I would actually like to do a whole video about Rome and its progression through history. It's a fascinating subject. This is the Annals of Rome. It's the only piece of Roman history that we have written by a real Roman. It was written in 109 ACE by Tacitus, and it tells the entire history of Rome. But there's something I don't need. This book is, this is just book one. There's a bunch of books, and as long as this is, you sit here and you wonder to yourself, how did Tacitus write this with a pen and quill on parchment paper? Right, yeah, we're, let's not go there. I want you to see this in the beginning, though. And then we're going to talk about Romulus and Remus, the two founders of Rome, and some big symbolism. Like I said, all you have to do is follow the symbols when it comes to the Alpha Draconian reptilians. And Rome would become their power, and Rome is still in power. Rome at the beginning was ruled by kings. That's very important. I just went over briefly how monarchy is an idea that comes out of all things, Babylon, where we get the Sumerian kings list. And each of the Anunnaki had their own jurisdiction. And that model of ruling the world is still how the reptilians and Illuminati stay in power today. Rome never died. You think they disappeared into history and just became the Vatican and we got popes instead of emperors? No, that's not the case at all. Romulus was the first king of Rome, and he had a brother, Remus and Romulus. And this is actually the only depiction we have of him on a Roman coin. Probably a reptilian, we know that. Some very strange things about this, though. This is the infamous statue of Remus and Romulus feeding on the tits of a wolf. I've had people ask me what this Roman symbol actually means before, and I've never addressed it. The symbol of the wolf, much like the eagle would become the symbol of the Anunnaki, that's the one they would embrace, because that was also the symbol of Rome. But this is specifically dealing with Remus and Romulus and the founding of Rome. So why are they feeding off the tits of a wolf? Well, the wolf is one of the 7 evil spirits in Babylon. This is a Sumerian text called the 7 evil spirits, the devils and evil spirits of Babylonia. And I've read this before, and if you look here on this line, it says that the 5th evil spirit is a furious wolf who knoweth not to flee. Yes, the wolf is one of the 7 evil spirits from Sumeria. It also becomes the symbol of Romulus and Remus feeding on her tits to found Rome. Like I said, follow the symbols. For anyone that follows Mandela effects, you're quite aware that the lion shall lay with the lamb has been replaced in your Bible through the Mandela effect. Open up your Bible and go check it. People freak out when I tell them about this. It will now say the wolf lies with the lamb. If your Bible actually still says the lion shall lay with the lamb, you should actually dox that and put that up on YouTube and show people, because my Bible's been changed. Everyone else I talk to, they go to their Bibles and they look. And yes, the wolf is an evil spirit. The wolf is also prominent in, of all things, the Viking story of Ragnarok. Fenrir is one of the wolves in Ragnarok. So there you have one symbol that raises a lot of flags. The second one that should raise a lot of flags is the fact that this is the symbol of Rome, SPQR, Senators and People of the Republic of Roma. And yes, the eagle was their symbol. Why was the eagle their symbol? Because it looks just like the Anunnaki that I showed you from Sumeria. It's the closest thing they can put as a reptilian and get away with it. And this would be the same symbol that we get in America when we're founded. Yes, it's not because the eagle's a noble bird. It's the closest thing looking like the Anunnaki that they can show, the reptilian Anunnaki that they can get away with. Pretty interesting. We live in a world of symbols. This is why I tell people follow the eagle. Rome never died. Their power never died. I'll tell you briefly what happened. Through Roman expansion, I should have, I don't need to actually pull that up. It's not really much I can show you for the history on it anyway. Rome, we know they conquered much of the ancient world. They had very close ties with Spain also. That's why the Roman short sword was the gladius. That's a Roman sword that legionaries used, and that's a Spanish short sword. Spain has a lot of... Spain would... I made videos about the bull cults of Roma before. It's another video. I know I'm always saying the video's on my channel. If you look for it, I'll put the play. But I have made video on the bull cults of Roma and the Vatican. I get very frustrated. I tell people I'm Catholic and they want to come around. I know more about what's going on in the Vatican than probably most do. And I'm not just talking about the modern pedo stuff. I'm talking about the real occult symbolism and the power the Vatican has. That's on a powerful ley line. And Rome never died. We all know that Rome conquers the ancient world. Eventually, they would meet up in the Holy Land of Israel, and they would come in contact with the Pharisees. The Pharisees are the 72 Pharisees that brought the Babylonian teachings teachings known as Talmud to the Israeli. Well, they technically weren't Israelis then. I'm sorry, the Israelites, the Jews, and it was the Pharisees that carried these Babylonian teachings called the Talmud. There's a documentary about the Talmud and what's actually in there on my Patreon. I'm not allowed to put that on YouTube. There's a few subjects I'm not allowed to touch that I'm highly knowledgeable in. One is the Nazis and their secret society known as the Vril. I get asked about that a lot. I know a lot about the Vril. In fact, I had a sub just email me about Maria Orsic. I did get that email. I told her I'd love to make a video about it, but I can't because of YouTube. Anytime you want to make a video about Nazis, yeah, good luck on YouTube with that one. It's a shame we can't even tell a lot of our own history because they ban it for hate speech. How retarded is that? And so they make it to the Holy Land. Then we have Jesus Christ comes along. Teaching, like I said, anyone who becomes a beacon of light and hope is attacked by the elites. Jesus gets crucified not from the Romans. It was the Pharisees who wanted Jesus Christ to be crucified, because I believe that the reason Jesus was put on this earth is because of probably the Alpha Draconians and to lead human civilization on the right path. So maybe God works in mysterious ways. You've heard that. So yes, he sends Jesus here, and I believe Jesus was very real. Rome would eventually hijack Christianity, and we get the Vatican, what is known as Catholicism. I know, that's a story all in itself. Israel, the Holy Land, will become the center of Rome's mystic arts and secret Freemasonry is based on Jewish mysticism and the Kabbalah. So that becomes one of their locations. That becomes like their mystical and kind of, I wouldn't say spiritual. That's not the word I'm looking for, because they hijacked what they teach. We all know, like, Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. That was actually the Roman god Mithra who was born on the 25th. And I've covered that before also. So Rome decides to, after they secure the Holy Land and hijack Christianity, set up the Vatican, and they would eventually become the beacon of Catholicism for the world. And they are no longer pagan now, but Militia Christo and soldiers of Christ. So the story continues. So the next place they conquer is England, where they set up Londinium. They first tried to conquer the Druids, and the Druids are the natives to England. And their history is kind of shrouded in mystery. We really don't know the truth because Romans won't tell us the truth about it. Anyone who wasn't Roman was looked down upon by them. So what would happen is the first fleet that goes to try to conquer the Druids, it's said that the Druids summoned a tempest and sank the Roman fleets. I believe that was led by Julius Caesar. Was in power when that first invasion happened. The second one, we have a general, I believe his name is Plautius. Yes, General Plautius would conquer Britannia. He would go back with legions. He would beat Boudica, the warrior queen, and 100,000 Celts in one of the most infamous battles in history, when the Roman legions were outnumbered and slaughtered 100,000 Celts. And then Rome would take control of Britain and set up Londinium, which is on a ley line, and they would continue with monarchies. England would become the staple of monarchies, kings and queens throughout the world. Rome would also use England for something else, and rather than Rome going around conquering the world now, after England gets set up, after the Romans supposedly leave and England gets its independence and becomes a monarchy and the kingdoms unite. I watch a lot of shows on ancient history about that, everything from Vikings to the Last Kingdom. Very aware of English history of their kingdoms and until they united under one king. But we're still getting that Babylonian way of ruling with the kings and queens. Yeah, Rome left, but did Rome ever really leave? Now, Londinium will become the administrative branch of Rome. Londinium is modern-day London. The reason why all of our medical terms, all of our legal terms, every animal that's classified is given a Latin surname is because Latin is a dead language. So why are all of our legal, medical, and animal species written in Latin? That is the language Rome uses. Latin's not dead. Rome still uses it. That should be a big clue right there. Secondly, for example, when you become a lawyer in the United States of America, you take a bar exam. The bar stands for the British Administrative Registry, meaning that the basis of most of our laws, this is what I mean about England becoming the administrative branch, is based on Britain. We also get British maritime law, the law of the seas, and commerce law. Rome would give us civil law, which is where you get civil court from. And every country works in secret behind. I've covered maritime courts before, but that is the way. So Rome set up this whole way of ruling over the entire planet through their administrative proxies in Israel, setting up America. We're more or less the new, we're like a big money-making organization and the military wing of Rome now in America. They get the Holy Land, the center of occult mysticism. That's why it's called, unquote. And all these cities are on ley lines as well. Just remember that. Even Golgotha, where Jesus was crucified. So Rome hijacks Christianity. Now they are no longer conquering the world with their legions, because I guess that didn't work out too good. Rome had a lot of blood on her hands. I often tell people the biggest weapon of mass destruction in history was not a gun. It was the Roman gladius. That thing has shed more blood than any AR-15, M16, or any other gun that you could imagine. When Romans had battles, you're talking in one day, Rome slaughtered 100,000 Celts on that battlefield in England. Can you imagine the amount of just seeing 100,000 dead bodies? I mean, even more than that because of some of the Romans who were killed in battle. That's horrific. And this is the way they went around conquering the world. Rome would also disarm villages and take weapons away. If we ever hear about gun grabs, I wonder where that idea comes from. That's straight out of Rome. That's Rome's way of conquering back then. The legions would take all the swords and weapons out of the villages. And you also had to pay tribute to Rome. Taxes. This is where we get taxes from. It's all tribute to Rome. And Rome would allow you to continue to worship your gods and goddesses. You didn't have to adopt the Roman pantheon, but you had to pay tribute, and you had to give them slaves, and you had to be disarmed. Sound a little familiar? Because this is still going on in modern times if they get their way. This is a patch used by one of our military organizations. It says Omnis Vistro Substructio El Service Ad Nubis. That is Latin. What is Latin doing on a military patch? Why is there a dragon clutching the earth? That translates out roughly to all your base are servant to us. Meaning Rome never died. Babylon never died. The reptilians are still in control. So what happened? Where did Rome go? Well, after they conquered England and half of the known ancient world and decided they're going to use the kind of Greco-Roman pantheon way of ruling over society, we're still pretty much following we're not following the Roman gods, supposedly. We're united under Christendom, but that's a bunch of bull. I know what goes on in the Vatican. I know about the Jesuits. The Vatican and Rome control every secret society on this planet. That was another way. This is why they get the nickname the octopus also, because they have their tentacles in everything. And all the secret societies are ruled by Rome. And they all engage in paying, this is who the real masters are. A lot of people think, and I hear jokes, the Jews run the earth. No, you haven't got a damn clue. Israel and the Holy Land is a proxy of Rome. But if you think the Jews run the world, no, Rome runs the world, the reptilians. And I'm pretty much going to prove that. We have a time in history called the Dark Ages, where we have 1,000 years of missing history. It is theorized. I'm not the first researcher to come up with this, although, like I said, this is something I like to do in a longer video. It's theorized that Rome, to get themselves out of the public spotlight, decided they would relocate themselves somewhere where nobody would bother them, and they can run the whole entire planet through all these proxies they set up. They would use England to continue conquering the world and hiding evidences of ancient civilization, Atlantis, or what have you. This is why mainly it was Spanish conquistadors and England that were going around in all the islands in the South Pacific, and why all South Pacific and Islands in the Caribbean all have either English, French, or Spanish names because, like I said, these were remnants of ancient Lemuria and Atlantis. They didn't want our real history being known. And they had to, so they went there. They would come eventually to Turtle Island, which is North America, the New World. Rome always had their sights set on conquering here. So Rome did something very clever. And I asked people before, what country comes to mind that you never hear about in politics, world news, or never makes it on, they're never talked about? Anyone know what flag that is? Well, you might be able to. And what that symbol means? This is the flag of Greenland. And it is this international symbol of power. Yes, if you look at any power button on any device you have, it's more or less shaped like a circle. Interestingly enough, too, the colors are red and white. Red was a Roman color used on their flag. Greenland? Whoa, what do you mean? Yes, Rome relocated to Greenland, under the ice. And, it gets stranger. What's even more, like I said, they use a lot of symbolism. The flag of Greenland was designed by a guy whose name is Stu Christiansen. I find that name highly suspicious. Christiansen, since they hijacked Christianity. Why would they go to Greenland? Well, like I said, no one knows they're there. No one thinks about Greenland. No one talks about Greenland. No one thinks of even going to Greenland. Greenland, yes, it's mostly covered in ice. There are a few small towns, but most of it's a national park. Very hostile, invited. It's theorized that these little towns here are Rome's gateway to the rest of the world, getting goods and supplies for them, and that the Illuminati themselves, the Alpha Draconian reptilian Illuminatis, specifically relocated to Rome. Yeah, lizards under the ice? Who'd have thought? Well, it gets stranger. Not only is Greenland's flag the international symbol of power, I guess the Roman eagle would have been a little too obvious, right? Like I said, no one talks about Greenland. Years ago on the internet, we had this. This is called the Greenland anomaly, when someone photographed this massive object that was underneath the ice sheets in Greenland. It's my belief that that is where Rome is at, under the ice in Greenland. They relocated there during the Dark Ages. They would leave the Vatican as kind of their central seat of power, under the guise of the Pope and Catholicism. The Holy Land is their mystical root of power, and Britain would become their administrative branch of power. For many years, Britain would also continue their world conquest. Did Britain now have the term, the sun never sets on the British Empire? They continued Rome's work for them under the guise of being England. The Greenland theory that Rome relocated to Greenland is a fascinating subject, and like I said, there's a few weird things going on with Greenland. I'll do this in another video and go into more depth on it. It might be a little mind-blowing to some people to think that Rome, and this is why I laugh at people when they try to say, oh, the Jews are in power, the Masons are... No, you don't know. You have no idea. The Vatican is just part of Rome, yes, and they still run everything. All taxes that countries pay is tribute to Rome. That's where that idea comes from. We do it in the form of taxes. Now, it's Roman tribute, and Rome figured out a few ways to run the world. They created money. No intelligent civilization in the universe would have money. We would barter for goods. Except bartering would make countries like Africa the world's superpower just from their natural resources, from all the diamonds and gold and other minerals they have there. They couldn't have that. Hence comes England. You understand how that works now? And if this is true, this means that, we have some of the reptilian royals are in public view, hence comes the royal family in England. Like I said, England would become the staple not only for administration, but for monarchical rule. When they first founded the United States of America, we had 9 leaders before George Washington, because they were going to make this a constitutional monarchy. Did you know that? Yes, we were going to have a king. But it was decided, no, kings aren't working out too good, which is why I said Babylon redevelops itself. You know, the emperor becomes the pope, and you know, same soup, different bowl, right? They decided, no, we're going to give them a president and give them elections and let them think that they have power to elect. You get the idea how it goes with that. But we all know that most presidents, I wouldn't say Trump too much is now, is he? But most of them were Masons and controlled by the Illuminati themselves and put into power. And like I said, follow the eagle. The symbolism should be right in your face. Why is our logo an eagle? It's not a noble bird. And why are we in America using the same logo as Rome, whose symbol was the eagle? And if you ever wondered about Romulus and Remus and why they're sucking on the tits of a wolf, I just explained that to you. Yes, that is the wolf, one of the 7 evil spirits from Babylon or Sumeria. Now you see the symbolism and why Rome would use that in the founding of Rome for King Romulus, sucking on the tits of the bull. They knew they were about to get into some evil things, such as world domination. But did they really have to dominate the world since they created us in the first place? Well, they needed to rule us and give us the illusion that human civilization was progressing. But what I find, and I'm going to leave the video with this, is amazing, is the Babylonians first come here. They set up temples for themselves, the Anunnaki, places where humans can go and worship them. And thousands of years later, they tuck tail and go hide in Greenland under the ice because I guess they got scared. They didn't want to deal or be in the public eye anymore. So, you want to find out where the real Illuminati are and the real power? Remember, this is why Greenland's flag is the international symbol of power. We live in a world of symbols, and symbolism is very big on their agenda. They use it everywhere. Why is the American, and even take countries like Russia, their symbol is the double phoenix. It's another avian bird-like symbol. England, they're a little special. England just uses dragons. Yeah. Dragons and unicorns, of all things. I've made videos on the unicorn symbol before and what that actually stands for. But yeah, England. Oh yeah, screw it. We're just going to use dragons as our symbols. Yeah, and there's a lot of dragons in London. I've seen all the dragon statues from England online. They're everywhere. Gee, I wonder where that comes from, right? So, I know. It's going to be all for the video. I hope I did a good job here. I'm trying to cover about 1 million years of world history and keep it under 2 hours. All the links to everything I was showing will be in the description. If anyone can help us out with donations through Patreon or with merchandise, all the links will be in the description. Also, I'm not monetized on YouTube. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the lecture. If there's any questions or comments, leave them below. I will get more into depth about that Greenland theory in Rome in the future. Do not worry about that. Any questions or comments, leave them below. And until we speak again, follow the eagle and take care.